Now, with that, what I'm going to do is share with you a brief background on the incident and aftermath. And after this, we will start our session, which is a Friday night at about 8:45 p.m. There was a Norfolk Southern Railway train that jumped the tracks. A number of rail cars tumbled off the tracks onto the ground and into a nearby creek. 11 of those rail cars had hazardous materials in them. At about 10 p.m., there was a 1-mile evacuation zone established. And over the next several days, contamination was found. Chemicals had migrated into creeks that had gone into the air. On February 6th, Norfolk Southern recommended an open burn, which was the venting and release of vinyl chloride from the 5 rail cars that they transported that were damaged. Approximately 1 million pounds of vinyl chloride was released. February 8th, agencies lifted the evacuation order based on test results, and after re-entering, the workers and the public complained about chemical exposure symptoms. I show this picture here from the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, and this basically shows that the rail cars derailed, they were damaged, they leaked products into a nearby creek. Federal agencies assumed cleanup responsibility about 3 weeks later. The chemical exposure symptoms were reported by railway workers, cleanup workers, residents, businesses, politicians, and their staff, as well as CDC employees, journalists, and others. And one of the challenges were that after the evacuation order was lifted, there were many questions about chemical fate in air, groundwater, buildings, creeks, and agriculture areas. What was on the train, according to Norfolk Southern, was a diverse array of different products. Some of them were pure chemicals. Others were products like PVC resin and other items. It's important to recognize this information because this is what you would necessarily test for after the incident. What I wanted to show you is a picture here on the left-hand side showing where the spill site is, which is this red flame. That's where the derailment site was. Going from left to right was the railroad tracks, that orange dashed line. And then going from right to left is a creek called Sulphur Run. Municipal drinking water wells for the village of East Palestine are not shown on the map. They're basically onto the upper left, away from the creek. But private drinking water wells are along Leslie Run, which is a waterway that was heavily contaminated by the chemicals released from this incident, as well as up and around East Palestine. Then the Pennsylvania border is basically less than 1 mile east or to the right of the spill site. On the right-hand side of this slide, what I want to show you is that there are creeks like Sulphur Run that go directly underneath people's homes and businesses. And when you have contamination that spills into waterways, if that contamination is volatile, it will go up into the air. And this was a concern after the disaster. Now, there are a number of other organizations that responded to the incident. The Ohio River Valley Water Sanitation Commission looked for contamination in the Ohio River. And so where you see a star in the upper right, that is where East Palestine was. You have contamination flow down Sulphur Run, into Leslie Run, then into other waterways that ultimately made its way to the Ohio River. And so some of the contamination actually flowed 100 miles downstream. The Department of Health and Human Services, or ATSDR, sent a team in to conduct what's called an assessment of chemical exposures. And this was a study working hand in hand with the states of Ohio and Pennsylvania to understand who was exposed, what type of chemical exposure symptoms happened, where were they exposed, and what potentially medical treatment that they received. The National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences also conducted its own literature review to triage what chemicals that they thought were important to understand. They engaged the community to understand what critical public health and medical questions that they had and brought in experts to help understand what types of exposures occurred, what are the critical health and research priorities that are needed. This information is available. There's a number of recorded presentations also. And finally, the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board conducted an investigation shortly after the derailment occurred. Their report and investigation is posted online, and you can find out more about that at ntsb.gov. But I think one of the main takeaways from that incident was something that the NTSB chair mentioned in a congressional hearing in March. And that was that the venting and burning of vinyl chloride, which is a hazardous material, was unnecessary, and that the system should have been allowed to cool down so that additional chemical release didn't occur. A more detailed timeline of incidents, different media reports, different government actions and statements can be found in what's called the supporting information file at one of the new studies that was published recently.